Welcome back to the Hoosier Stereo podcast. As you can see, we're missing Camden here today. And if I have this right, I think it's because he doesn't like Derek, I think is what he said. I think that's why he wanted to skip out.
That's what Devin told me.
Yeah, so that's why Camden's not here. But we're going to still have a great show anyways. So, Devin, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So, as you can see, we have Derek here. Welcome to the podcast, Derek.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And so, the question that we'll be asking Derek questions, and the topic will be about, like, the importance of worship. Since he's the worship leader, we thought he'd be the best choice for this.
It's a lot of pressure.
Maybe go fix something. You keep going.
So, just like everyone else that has been on the podcast, this is the question. What's the Bible verse you have carried with you on your walk with Christ, and what's the story behind that verse?
So that's been a one that I thought a lot about since we started talking about this, and I think I settled in on Jeremiah 29:11 through 13, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart." So I picked that verse because I think to me, I'm like really old compared to all of you guys, and just the day-to-day life. This one reminds me a lot of when things are going wrong. Like this week, Maddie's car, the battery went out, and there's always something going wrong, and it just reminds me that God's got my life in his hand, and I don't need to worry about trivial things. Like I don't need to worry about money. I don't need to worry about sleep. I don't need to worry about anything like that because I know God holds me in the palm of his hand. And so I think that's the verse that I would give that means the most to me, because throughout my life it's just been, we don't want to talk about my past probably, but from when I came back to Christ, when I've been roughly 2004, 5-ish, that's something that he's reminded me that he's got me every single day and he carries me.
So for the second question, what is worship in your eyes?
So this is another one that, and I'm going to have some questions to pitch back to you guys at different points through here.
Of course, feel free.
Good. So worship to me is when you respond to God for who he is and what he's done, whether that's through gratitude, obedience, surrender. When you hear worship, people always think music, which, don't get me wrong, I think some of my fondest memories of worship, as far as in settings, singing, and playing instruments, has been, we've had some really awesome sets at Hoosier Stereo. Those have been some of the ones that I hold near and dear to my heart, and every year you think of how can we recreate that, and then you don't want to because you want it to be, everything to be, and so it's hard. But to me, it's a lot more than music. Worship is basically how you live your life. It's your daily, dose of God. It's your daily reminder that he is controlling everything that he's given you. And so, it's a posture to me. It's not about a certain moment at church. It's not a certain moment at camp. It's not a certain moment at chrysalis. It's not a certain moment at anything. It's every day. How do you live your life? All of y'all know that I'm emotional. Worship seems to bring that out the most in me. And I don't know why, but I think it's because I think God's wired me to be connected so much to it that my brain goes to certain moments when I hear a song, and I can't tell you how many times I've been on a lawnmower in the middle of the yard and just bawling, singing a worship song, and just let go of the steering wheel, and it's a zero turn, so it's just spinning in a circle, and I'm just weeping. And so I think that that's what worship is. To me, is it's not just it is those moments, but I recommend to anybody that whatever you put in, it's what comes out. So worship music is the only thing I listen to. I don't listen to anything else because I want my heart to be filled with, if things come out of me, I want it to be of God and for God. So that's worship to me in a nutshell.
So How did being on the worship band? How did you know being on the worship band is what you wanted to do?
I didn't. So that question was funny to me just because it was never in my mind, ever. Like, ever. In my life. Backstory on me is I played guitar since I was 16, taught myself, and I played in different bands, and I actually played in bars when I was like 19. And so doing worship was never part of the plan for me. But then when we had the shift here, and I felt God telling me that there was more that I could do with the talents that He had given me, because I still to this day can't read music. I can't read sheet music or anything like that. Like, I'm probably I'm the dumbest person on the stage, like when it comes to music. And I just have a great team that surrounds me. And so I think the easiest thing for me to make the decision was God kind of laid it on me, like, when we started talking about music and different things, and we kind of formed a band, which was pretty cool because Chris has probably told the story. You guys have probably heard him tell the story that he never played drums before until one day I was just like, I started coming here because I was dating Val at the time, and that was 22 years ago. I started coming here, and then Chris came shortly after, and I was like, do you play the drums? And he's like, no. And I'm like, you want to? And then I just got a drum kit, and we put it in my basement, and we just started messing around. And then before long, Haley was singing, Val was singing, Brooke, came in, and we formed a band, which we named Breaking Silence, which was pretty cool because we were a Church of Christ that didn't have instruments, so very apt name. And I think once we started doing Breaking Silence things, we started going out, and I got seeing that side of worship where you're doing the songs and people are singing and stuff. That was what really set it off in me. But still to this day, I don't know how or why any of this has happened, but I'm blessed beyond measure for sure. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to play, and I can't see life without it. I turned 46 in 3 days. You heard that right. 46 in 3 days. So I keep asking myself, how many more years do I have left to do worship? And then I think, Chris Tomlin's 70, I think. And Crowder, they're all in their 50s, I got a while. So long answer that it was at first was never in my cards. I would have never, if you'd have told me, back then before, I'd have been like, there's no way a church is going to let me do anything like that. And just shows you that God can do what He wants, and He can change people. So probably not the answer you expected. But
it was a good answer. So what's the worship song that's helped you with your walk with Christ?
Oh, the next two questions, Devin, were the hardest two questions for me to answer. So for me, I think I tossed around a bunch of songs, but I ended up settling on Matt Redman's Heart of Worship, because I think a lot of times people think of music and worship and things. It's a production, right? You go see Brandon Lake or Crowder or somebody in concert, and you see this production value. Well, that's not worship to me. Worship to me is when the person on the stage or the person playing can fade out into the back wall, and you don't even notice it because you're so in tune with with God in that moment. And so Heart of Worship reminds me, when the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come longing just to bring, I'll bring you more than a song, because a song in itself is not what you would read. It's just one of those things that makes me think that leading worship is a humbling experience, because you look at, again, I defer everything to the team that I have. I have the best team you could ever imagine, with the singers that we've got, with Chris playing drums and things like that. I've got this really awesome core of people that are family to me, that just I get to do it with. And it's just one of those things that it was hard for me, but that song reminds me that we have to be stripped and humbled to do it. And the moment that it becomes a production and one of those things, if it ever loses its luster, is the day that I want out. Like, because to me, that song reminds me that it's about what we're doing. It's about giving God the glory. It's about giving God back what he's given us and praising him, which he doesn't require us to sing a song. My life can be worship, like I was saying earlier. The way I live my life and the way I talk to my wife and my children and, my friends and my peers and my coworkers, that can be worship. But to me, there's just a special place that I feel like when you're at camp or you're at, in church and we hit that time where the music comes in, like that's the time that you can feel, like to me, and I guess you guys can attest, like that to me is when like your heartstrings are tugged towards the cross. Like to me, it's just that worship is the centering of pulling yourself to it and going, okay, yeah, I'm here. And so I think the heart of worship really brings that home for me. So.
The next question is, what's your favorite worship song?
What day are we talking about?
That's such a real answer.
This was the hardest, and I don't have an answer because to me it's. Let me ask you this for you guys: when you're having a bad day or you're in the middle of something, how many times have you turned on a song that you've listened to a million times, whether it's like you shuffle your iTunes or you turn on Air One or something like that, and how many times has whatever you needed to hear been in that song? Whether it's High 99 and you're listening to country, or you turn the TV on and it's a movie, but how many times have you gotten the message that you needed to hear out of whatever you were listening to?
A crazy amount of times.
Yeah. And then you look back and you're like, stop showing off. It's one of those things to me. It just shows, to me, it shows that God has a really good sense of humor. I mean, because I feel like a lot of times I'm beating my head on the wall here going, good grief, will you just talk to me? And he's like, hello, listen to me. I'm speaking and you're not paying attention. And then you turn on a song and you're like, oh, and then I'm like, I get it. But I mean, I have songs that mean a lot to me. So like I said earlier, when I do worship, it's my brain and my body goes back to certain moments. So my soul attaches certain time frames to certain songs. So like Gratitude. Gratitude is a song that it wrecks me every time we play it. I don't care if somebody else is doing it, and it doesn't matter if it's Brandon Lake on the radio or whatever. Like that song it pulls me back to a moment on a flight where we were doing that song, and like I put myself back in that moment, and my emotions, everything just like flood back to where it's just like in that set with all those guys there and the team and everything else, and I just go back to that, and then I think back to moments like that, and then Hoosier Stereo last year where we did it. And we made the decision that I wanted to do something different with it, and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to do that song in our last set, and I want to just end it and crash out and let the kids sing, and we just stop and just go out into the kids and just like worship. And I said, I told the team I said, find your kid, because we all at this point have kids in it. And like I found Ellie and JC, and I went out and put my arms around them, and then I basically just sobbed on them for a little bit, and then I left and went and found Maddie. And so that song probably to me would be, it just holds a place in my heart that it'll be hard for something to really take that away, because I have so many memories attached to that song. And I think it's definitely built on like Hoosier Stereo. Like I said, it's definitely on you guys, on the students and the team, the atmosphere that we've managed, the culture we've managed to build over the past however long I've been doing this. It's the culture that we've got of where there's just worship that's just crazy to me sometimes. Like I remember this past year especially, like night one, y'all were singing so loud, like I couldn't hear Haley, who's standing beside me. We were like, oh man, we don't usually hit this till like Thursday, and it's like the first set, and we're so it's so awesome to us. And so those are the moments for me. Long-winded answer to your question, but it depends on the moment for me. But I think Gratitude, The Stand is another one that hits me, takes me back to, I was at a conference in Dallas with Brooke in like 2010, and that song came on, and I was in this like dome with 15,000 people, and that song came on. I'd never heard it, and I just remember being in that moment, and like everybody standing up, raised their hands, and I had to sit down because I was just like shuddered. I was just in shock of like what I was witnessing, and like that was the moment that like the real first moment like that for me. So, but I'd probably come back to gratitude. So, any Brandon Lake song. Like,
the next question is what's the first worship song you've ever heard?
I'm going to show my age a little bit. Too bad I already gave it to you. So, What If I Stumble by DC Talk. I'm sure you've probably heard the song. It's right after Jesus Freak on the album. CDs, for those of you that didn't have that in life. I had a cassette tape of it, so that tells you how old I am. And I just remember that song was the first I heard. And I remember even in my younger years, in my early teen years, hearing that song, and it has, I'm sure you know the quote at the beginning. Do you know the quote at the beginning? I'll put you on the spot. Like,
it's been a while since I've heard that song.
Just tell me you've never heard it, Deaven. So it says the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge with their lips and walk out the door and get on with their lifestyle. That's what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. And to me, that's like you don't even need to do the rest of the song. Like you just drop the mic, turn it off, and be like, "Yep." I mean, that sums up. And so that one's always stuck with me, probably from my younger years, just because of that first quote, because it's so true. Like, people, if I come in here and lead worship, and then I'm out cussing and screaming and doing all these things out there, like, obviously I lose any credibility, and people are going, well, I'm not going to go to that church because he's a mess, and things like that. And so I think that was the first song I ever heard, and that stuck with me because of that. I still listen to it every now and then today. It's pretty rare now. But yeah, great song and really good message, I think. So,
where in the Bible did worship originate?
So here's where the fun starts. I enjoyed this question. So I'm going to ask you, when you hear the word worship, what does it mean to you? For both of you to answer.
Do you answer? Do you want me to start?
You can go.
So you said, like, are you basically flipping it on us, like how we define worship, or what do we
like,
see it as?
When somebody says worship, what do you think? Like, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Well, I think the first thing that pops to my mind is obviously you're talking about like worship music, but broadly worship, I would just say giving glory and giving like credit in that way. Maybe not credit, but just kind of giving your sort of love and admiration and like, desire, I guess, for God. That's kind of how I define worship.
Good.
I mean, kind of the first thing that pops into my head is like whenever I think of worship is like our worship band up there on the stage. That's kind of what I think about. And then some Hoosier Stereo and Christmas nights. That's just what I think about it.
And I think that's great, because that's when in worship in context, that's what most people think of. Music. You think of music. You think of things like that. But I made a few bullet points because I thought this was something I really wanted to take notes on so I could convey what I thought. But worship starts with God. So in Genesis, he's creating everything, and he's revealing his power through the creation, right? And he's creating all these things. But the worship is that God speaks, and then creation responds. And so worship is always that response, like you guys were saying. And so to me, like when people are always like, well, I'd love to have been there when God spoke like the sun, and I wouldn't have. Like, it'd have been terrifying, like, he speaks and out comes this ball of fire, and like the stars and things. But you think of, Louis Giglio does a fantastic job on this subject. And we've done a few of his studies here, like preaching wise and things, but he just does a really good job of saying, like, well, how when God spoke to the stars begin to make noise, they begin to shine, they begin to, rocks cry out in worship. Like, everything that God creates responds to him, right? Like, and so that was the first point I wanted to make, is that, worship starts with God. So that's like the very intimate piece of, like I said in Genesis, that's worship begins when God reveals who he is. So he's the creator of everything, but as soon as he creates it, those things begin to worship until man comes along, and we'll, I'll bring that up. But the big thing for me is that worship begins with God and not man. And so I think sometimes that's where it gets confused, that, they're like, well, before man, there's no worship. Well, no, everything was worshiping God. Like the stars, the heavens, everything was worshiping him from the very beginning. And then we came and torched a lot of it. So, and then I put that the second piece is worship becomes broken. You start thinking about Genesis 4, Cain and Abel. First human worship shows the problem, same action, different heart. Sin affects worship. People still worship, but often for the wrong reasons. And so, those are things that from the start, worship needs restoration. I put that as one of my bullet points here is, when you look at people still come in and worship, but it could be for the wrong reasons. So maybe I'm just coming in and I'm trying to force God's hand of saying, this, I really need this. I really need this. So I'm going to come in, and if I give it all, God's going to answer my prayer. And it's like, no, God's probably answering your prayer by not giving you what you need. I'm sure you guys have noticed that in life. Sometimes, Garth Brooks said it best. Sometimes you got to thank God for unanswered prayers. That's a shout out to Chris. He'll enjoy that when he watches talk about Garth Brooks. So,
Yep.
Those are things. Jesus says in John 4 that true worshipers will follow the Father in spirit and truth. And so, it's not about location. It's not about rituals. It's not about a style. It's not about like whether you're just praising them with your voice. If you're praising them with your tears, your laughter can all be considered worship. But it's just those moments that when you're completely vulnerable and you're completely giving back to God. So I put on here that Jesus doesn't cancel worship, he redefines it. So, worship became real through Christ when he came. And then Jesus is the reason that we worship, obviously. And then I had a few more here that I'm not going to go real into detail with because we could be here all day. Some of the stuff that I wrote down. So, but worship is choosing who gets credit for the win. So one of the things that I do a lot, and I know you guys do too, is like music and sports define my life. Like those are the things that my two passions. And so I thought a lot about yesterday. Started thinking about, like how worship would go into, as we watch like college football in the playoffs and things, like how does it work and how does it look? And so, I put who gets the credit, An athlete scores a winning shot, the crowd cheers, the camera focuses on them. But the worship connection piece is who gets the glory. If life is about me, I want the highlight reel. But if life is worship, I point the spotlight to God. And I think that's one thing that is so cool when you watch like Fernando Mendoza, who never misses a moment when in the greatest scheme, like the greatest moments of his life, what's the first thing that he says? Like when he won the Heisman Award, what was the first thing he said when he got to the microphone? I give God all the glory for everything that he's given me. And he could just turn away from the mic and be done. And I think those moments, and I think you're seeing more of that, people that have the faith to worship like that and say, God's given me all the abilities and I give him, all the praise for what he's done. And so I think that's one of the cool things. And I think you see, if you watch the Rose Bowl, obviously when they got up and who should have won the offensive MVP? Probably Fernando Mendoza, right? Like he probably should have won it. But is he any good without the offensive line? So you always look at that. So I thought, and that was probably one of the more cool moments I think I've seen in a long time, is when they pushed to get the O-line, the offensive MVP. Like I thought that was Pat Coogan, who came from Notre Dame and transfers to IU. Thought that was really cool. That showed that whole focus of the worship wasn't about him, like it was about the team. Like God has blessed me with such a good team, and I thought that was really cool. And then I made a couple other things, which I said we won't spend all day here, but we can. But I put like practice versus game day. So like game days matter, but what really shows is commitment and practice. Same thing with music and worship. If we don't practice, and like I said, I am so blessed with the people that I'm surrounded with to do music with every Sunday and every camp and everything else that we do. If you saw us in practice sometimes, you would not ever think we could do what we do on stage, because we're a mess. Like monitors don't work. We came in and none of the channels worked one morning, and I was just And I get panicked still to this moment because obviously you want it to be good, but there's a lot of things that. So the practice is key. Do we have time to come in and practice that to make sure? Not because we want it to be, we want it to be perfect. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Like, we're going to make mistakes, but the biggest thing is, are we doing it to say, oh man, I made a mistake, or be like, I gave everything to God and like I got emotional, and they would probably say, well, Derek got emotional and forgot a chord, and that's part of it. But that practice is huge, but some of the things, just thinking about like. One of the things I always loved about some sports was how who do you play for, the name on the front or the name on the back, and I love the idea of some schools don't put like the player's last name on the jersey for that. Like, we're not playing for you, you're playing for such and such. Like, you're playing for this, so like it's bigger than you. And so I think it's a really humbling as a player. I mean, I haven't played sports for a long time, but that thought to me is another really cool way to think that, like, if I'm taking the credit for it, or am I saying, well, God's given me everything, and so I'm playing for the name on the front, which I bear His image and His cross, and so that's the name on the front of my jersey in life. I don't want my name on the back because my name's synonymous with all kinds of crap that I've done in my 45 years of life. I don't want to be defined by Smith. I don't want to be defined by who Derek has been for 45 years. I want to be defined by what Christ has done to me, even in the past 22 years, like just the change that He's given to me. Because I kid you not, like, if He can change me into a worship leader and an elder of a church, which is mind-boggling. If you saw somebody that I went to school with and you were like, hey, he's an elder at a church, they'd be like, and it didn't burn down when he walked in. I mean, but those are the type of things, I think that. Long way to answer your question, but just to say, like, I'm not playing for me. I'm not playing for, I want like everybody that I come into contact with to know that I bear the cross of Christ, and so that's what I want them to see. That's what I'm working for every day. I want my kids to see that. I want my wife to see that. I want our church to see that. I want all of you guys to see it, that it's the only way to live life. Like, it's the only way to live life, is you have to give all praise and glory to God, even in the hard moments. I always say that God's the God of the mountaintop when you're just on your high. He's the same God when you're in the valley. Like, He stands there holding your hand and weeping with you in those moments, but you've got to cry out to Him. And sometimes that's the hardest time to worship, is when you're face down. But it can also be hard when you're on the top of the mountain, because you a lot of times don't feel like you need Him. So I think just making sure you remember that He's got it all. So. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, I like that answer. That's a good answer.
And then I feel like you've really answered the last one in all of these. But what's the importance of worship?
I enjoyed this question. I wrote 5 bullet points down. And, I think number one is that worship connects us to God, but first and foremost. Worship isn't a song, it isn't a moment, it's just a place where your heart meets God's heart. Like, your place you just interconnect. And Psalm 95:6 says, come, let us bow down and worship, let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. So when we worship, we remember who God is and who we are in Him. And I think that's a critical point. Worship reminds us that we are seen, loved, and held by the Creator of the universe. So that's first and foremost, that worship connects us. Number 2, I wrote, worship changes our hearts. And so when you truly worship, our worries, pride, distractions fade. Worship reshapes us from the inside out. Romans 12:1 calls it an offering ourselves as living sacrifice. And so worship isn't about what we do. It's about letting God change us in our hearts to start to look more like His. And so I think this one is a critical point, that it changes your heart. And I think that's what, I used to, I'm just going to be honest, but, I used to have the worst mouth ever. Like, when Val and I first met, we worked at Kroger's together a long, long time ago, and I had a foul mouth. Like, I used profanity all the time, and I didn't realize how stupid I sounded until, like, now I think back, and I'm not sure. God, I mean, that's a whole other topic. You could do a podcast on why Val married me. There's no reason. Like, God had to be in it. So, still mind-boggling to me. So, But what I found is when it comes to this that I started to come to church here with her, and when I was around her family, I tried to be the good Derek. But then when I left there, I'd go back to my friend pool, which was a disaster, and I'd go back to my normal life. But what I found is it was very rare for those moments of this me that was around her and trying to be a good person, that very rarely bled into the dark side. But let me tell you, the dark side would sure seep into that sometimes, and I would find myself like on the verge of a cuss word, and then I'm like, and I'd swallow it, and I always wondered, like, why is it that is not the case? Like, shouldn't the light side blend into the dark? Like, and that's what I was missing, was that change of heart. I was missing that. I was trying to do things for her, and I completely, and I'll say till the last breath I take on this planet, God used her to save me, because he brought her into a point in my life I was the lowest I'd ever been, and he brought her in. And so what I thought was I was changing for her, and that's what spurred it on, was me trying to, like, I got to change for her, I'm going to lose her. And then, God used her to say, she kind of injected me into this church and into those things, to help me, like, really change my heart around. And so I think if you worship genuinely, where you're giving everything and you're having those moments, like, there's nothing more powerful to me than seeing somebody that can't sing because they're crying or because they're sitting there having a moment. Like, I could care less if, I used to say, and I joke that I don't care if you stand, sit, you can lie on the floor. Like, I don't care, whatever it takes for you to have a genuine moment and have that heart change. And so that was number two, just like, how does it change your heart, and how does it make you, you're not just going through the motions, because I can tell you right now, if you just go through the motions, people see through it in an instant, and then you lose credibility. Three, so I can get back on track here, worship strengthens us in life's storms. Worship reminds us of God's faithfulness even when life is messy. Worship lifts our eyes to him. Israel sang after God rescued from Egypt in Exodus 15, not because life was perfect, because God was faithful. So they had that moment where they knew, life still wasn't the best, but it could have been way worse, So worship reminds us that no matter what's happening, God is still good and he's still in control. And so that's a good one. Number four, I'll try to speed up a little bit. Worship honors God. Worship is the way we tell God, you're amazing, you're worth everything. Revelation 4:11 says, you are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power. And so worship isn't for our applause, it's for his. When we worship, we celebrate the one who loves us the most. So to me, it just reminds us again that God's in control and that he deserves everything, that any kind of honor and praise. And then last but not least, is that worship unites us as a body. When we worship together, it reminds we're not alone. Our voices join with others, hearts beating towards God. In Colossians 3:16, teach and admonish one another with songs of the Spirit. And so worship isn't a solo act, it's a family act celebrating the same God. So I put, my closing thought on that question was, worship matters because it connects us to God, changes our hearts, strengthens us, honors him, and reminds us that we're never alone. And so to me, it's one of those moments that, I can worship and have a moment, like I said, on the lawnmower, spinning in a circle and bawling in the yard. But to me, there's a power in it and a vulnerability when it's in that setting where, there's 50 people around you. And, like, if you're, some of the things that I love the most is, going back to Hoosier Stereo, is when we see you guys during a prayer night or during a worship time where I see a kid start to break down. And it used to be that, like, myself or Brooke or Chris or one of us would have to go and like interject ourselves in that situation and kind of try to help and speak into that. And we don't do that anymore, because I sit in the back and watch y'all do it. Like, I watch the youth go to the youth, and it's one of the more powerful things for us. We sit back and talk about it all the time, like how cool it is for us to see that no one's alone. And I think that's what that reminded me of, is, it unites us. So it's in those moments where that vulnerability comes out, and it may not, it's as simple as you may come over and just put your arm around somebody and be like, hey man, I'm here. I don't know what's going on. And I think back to Kenny Smith, when he lost his dad, and those moments in Hoosier Stereo, just of how powerful that unity and worship can be, and how much that just shows the glory of God of, like, yeah, here we are, we're a mess, but we're a mess together. Like, and we're a mess for God. It's messy, it's sloppy, but it's beautiful. Like I always say, God, when people, you don't hear me sing very often because, like, I've got people that sing way better than I do, and so I don't have to worry about that. But I tell my kids all the time, if like with 4 kids, I've had all of mine that are singing, and sometimes are they off key and off pitch? Yeah, I mean, like, there's a couple of my kids couldn't carry 2 in a bushel basket, but as a parent though, when you hear that, like, you're so, like, I love hearing my kids sing worship music, and they do it all the time. And now I've got Ellie who's joining the youth team and things like that, and so, but it just reminds me, and I want everybody to understand that, like, it's just like that moment, that proud parent moment. Like, that's how God feels. Like, when you're just worshiping, doesn't matter how it sounds, doesn't matter how it looks, how sloppy it is. If you mess up a chord, if you mess up a note, like, he doesn't care. Like, you're just in that symphony. Like, all he hears is my kid is singing to me and giving me everything they've got, and that to me is just like unreal.
Sure, good. Was that your last question?
Yeah.
Normally we would go into
Q&A with Cammy J.
I guess today it will be Q&A without Cammy J.
So just FaceTime because
Well, the good news, I guess, is that we didn't really have many questions. So I guess we'll close it off with, do you have any questions for us before our time? You don't have to, but just for conversation's sake, is there anything?
Yeah, so I mean, like, what do you guys envision? What's some of your favorite? I just want let me ask this: like, what's some of your favorite memories of worship from Hoosiers area? Like, some of your favorite moments that you can come up with.
It's hard to pick like a few. Like, 'cause I feel like a lot of them. What I think I really enjoy about Hoosier Stereo worship is that while it's like kind of the same thing as like what you guys are doing on Sunday mornings in that way, it's such a, like, at least to me, impactfully, it's a completely different scenario. Like, we could be singing the same song on like a Sunday morning to what is being sung at Hoosier Stereo, but like, to me, those are 2 completely different songs in a way, because like a song and like the memory it's attached to kind of go hand in hand. And so it's like, if I'm singing on a Sunday morning, it's like, it's not gonna, like, I don't know, like, just for me, like, Deaven could speak of it differently, or anyone else speak of it differently, but like, worship, like, in that sense, means so much more to me at Hoosier Stereo. And so those moments of like, it'll be like right before we go to have a party or whatever, it's like, that is normally when it's like the most emotional. So I say any of those, which we used to be Friday nights, but now they're Thursday nights. Any of those would probably be my answer. I think maybe this year specifically, because I think Camden can attest to this. We were standing right next to each other that night. It's just like every single song that was there for that night was just like exactly what I would have wanted for my last like night being a student at Hoosier Stereo. It was just like everything was hitting perfectly. And I don't know, that was just really emotional for me. So I would at least be my first answer. So
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll give you just a rebuttal of that
Mm-hmm.
it's a shout out and a praise for you guys, because you guys make it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the lack of fear, especially this year, with the willingness to just, like, everybody came in and it was just like, whatever we did, full on. Like, it didn't matter if we sang the same song 13 times in a row. Like, everybody was just, from the jump, we were like, oh man, like I said, we talked after that first night. I looked at Haley and I was like, good grief. She's standing right here and I can't hear her because it's so loud. We can't hear the monitors. And we had to turn the monitors up, which was such a unique perspective for us, because we've seen glimpses of it and stuff. But I just remember being there just thinking, oh man, like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, we're in over our heads. This is great. Like, so yeah.
That's what I think is really cool too, is you were talking about how like worship unifies us in a way. I think that's really interesting, because I remember like even my earlier days of Hoosier Stereo, where it's like, it would always start out timid, if that makes sense, where it'd be like the first couple nights, it's like, it's kind of, you're getting into it, and then it kind of builds up for that last one. Yeah. But I feel like kind of getting to a point now where, whether it's the older kids being more of an influence or like than they used to be, or if it's just, we have a younger generation that's more willing, whatever the case is, I definitely feel that unity more than I did even 5 years ago or 6 years ago, whenever I was having my first Hoosier Stereos in middle school. So
This goes back to the recent Hoosier Stereo. I tried this during one of the worship nights. I kind of just closed everything off, just shut my eyes and listened to everybody, and like I could hear that back row, like Sam, Camden, Brandon. I could hear them all just going. I could hear Everett and Paige's group going, Michaela, Millie. I could hear all of them, and like I was talking to Steven that night, and I go, I couldn't hear you or anyone else up there. All I heard was the students, and that's always one of my favorite moments. And
That's
it's
awesome. 'Cause
just
the beauty of that is that's how it should be.
it just hits harder whenever that's all you hear is just them. Like, because I was talking to Chloe about it, because her and I were paired up for table leaders. I was talking to her the morning before we left, and I go, honestly, that worship night, whenever you guys came out to the crowd, I didn't even know it until you came over to me. I go, I didn't even know you guys left the stage.
So I always think, like, to build off of that point, I think one of the, like, coolest things for me at least is to just kind of, like, stop singing in a way, and, like, in a way of worship, just kind of, like, listen to everyone else around you and see how they're worshiping. So, like, sometimes it's more impactful for me to just stop, like, me singing and just listen to, like, everyone else, like, also worshiping. And that's kind of, like, I don't really know how to put it into words, but just kind of that feeling of everyone else having that same feeling is pretty uplifting in a way.
Yeah.
Just kind of being able to appreciate the creation of that worship.
I understand. You'll see there are times that we'll intentionally cut out the instruments of a song just to hear, like, just so we can have that moment.
Oh,
of,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's probably the most, like, if you pay attention, you'll see me just with a huge smile on my face, and you'll see all of us just standing back, just grinning, because we know that the Spirit's rampant, and it's just so awesome to see, like you said. And so,
Another thing that hit me was I looked down the row of my row, because I was up front, and the youngest groups were up there. And usually the youngest groups are, like, usually kind of, I don't really know what to do here. I'm just kind of just going to sing along, but I felt like that they were into it really this year. And, like, it was just, I was like, there's sixth graders that are just singing their hearts out.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
Yeah. Anything else, or?
I think so.
All right, we'll close it off then. Thanks for watching the Who's Your Stereo podcast. And be sure to submit questions for future episodes. That's not been happening a lot.
I feel like that's an every episode thing.
Every episode, but one of these days we'll get just a bunch of questions. Like, we'll see. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, so that way you can stay updated on when our episodes are uploaded. And yeah, stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.